For 10,000 years, the Celestial Dominion ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, conquering worlds and crushing all who dared to resist. Their fleets were invincible, their power absolute. But then, on a distant, seemingly insignificant planet called Earth, an unexpected force rose to challenge their might. Admiral Sarah Chun, with Earth's primitive technology, led a victory that shattered the Dominion's centuries of supremacy. In the aftermath of the first defeat the Dominion had ever known, a desperate plea for mercy was sent to Earth. But what the Dominion revealed in their final moments would change the fate of the galaxy forever. For their greatest threat was not humanity, but something far older and far more terrifying. The broken throne, the golden halls of the celestial throne had never echoed with the sound of panic before today. For 10,000 years, the Celestial Dominion had ruled over 50,000 worlds with absolute authority. Their crystal ships were invincible, their energy shields impenetrable, their tactical computers flawless. They were the undisputed masters of the galaxy, worshipped as gods by countless species across the star systems, until today. High Chancellor Zephyros stood before the massive viewing screen in the command center of the Eternal Citadel, his normally composed features twisted with disbelief. His tall, ethereal form shimmered with the faint blue light that marked his species as energy beings of pure thought. Around him, his council of advisors whispered in hushed tones, their voices carrying the weight of impossible reality. "Show me the battle footage again," Zephyros commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance that had commanded respect across the galaxy for millennia. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the recent engagement near the Sol system. The Dominion's Third Imperial Fleet, consisting of 200 crystal battleships, had been sent to bring the newly discovered human species into the fold. It was supposed to be a routine pacification mission, the kind they had performed countless times before. Instead, they witnessed something that defied all logic and tactical doctrine. The human fleet was tiny by comparison, barely 30 ships of crude metal and primitive technology. Their vessels looked like flying scrapyards compared to the elegant crystal architecture of Dominion ships. Yet somehow, impossibly, they had not only survived the engagement, but had actually driven off the Imperial fleet. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, her weathered hands gripping the command console as she watched the retreating Dominion ships disappear into hyperspace. At 52 years old, she had spent her entire career preparing for conflicts that military strategists insisted would never come. Earth's first contact with alien life had been peaceful, they said. Advanced civilizations would be too enlightened for war. They claimed they had been wrong. Damage report, Chin called to her tactical officer. 17 ships heavily damaged for destroyed, but we're still operational, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torres replied, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that showed in his eyes. The enemy lost 37 vessels. Sarah nodded grimly. The cost had been high, but they had sent a message to the galaxy that Earth would not simply roll over and submit to alien rule. The Dominion had demanded humanity's immediate surrender and integration into their empire. They had offered advanced technology, extended lifespans, and a place in their perfect galactic society. The catch was that humanity would have to give up their independence, their chaotic creativity, their unpredictable nature. They would become another cog in the Dominion's vast machine of order and control. Earth's answer had been delivered with plasma cannons and nuclear torpedoes. Back on the Celestial Throne, Strategic Advisor Kirith was analyzing the battle data with growing bewilderment. The mathematical models that had predicted easy victory over every species for 10,000 years had completely failed against the humans. Their tactics make no sense, Kirith reported, his crystalline head pulsing with frustrated energy. They split their formations at random intervals, ignored optimal firing solutions, and used their damaged ships as weapons. No rational species would sacrifice resources so inefficiently. Yet they won, Zephyros observed quietly. For the first time in our recorded history, a primitive species has defeated a Dominion fleet in open battle. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. The Celestial Dominion's power was built on the perception of invincibility. They ruled not through fear alone, but through the absolute certainty that resistance was futile. Every species they encountered eventually submitted, because everyone knew that the Dominion could not be defeated. Until now. Defense Minister Valdris, his form crackling with nervous energy, stepped forward. "High Chancellor, we must consider the implications. If word of this defeat spreads, it could trigger rebellions across the Empire. Hundreds of species might declare independence." "They won't," Zephyros replied, though his voice carried less certainty than his words. "Most species value security over freedom. They will remain loyal as long as we can protect them from the greater threats." The greater threats. Those words carried weight that made even the mighty Dominion tremble. For all their power, for all their technological superiority, the Celestial Dominion lived in constant fear of what lay beyond the galactic rim. The ancient enemy that had nearly destroyed them 10,000 years ago, driving them to build their empire not out of conquest, but out of desperation. Meanwhile, on Earth, the victory celebration was subdued. President Elena Vasquez stood in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by military advisors and world leaders connected via secure communication links. The weight of first contact, having gone so wrong, pressed down on everyone present. "The question now is what they'll do next," General Robert Hayes said, his scarred face showing the strain of the past weeks. "Will they come back with a bigger fleet, or will they try diplomacy?" "They'll try diplomacy first," predicted Dr. Amara Okafor, Earth's leading xenobiologist. Their entire message structure suggested they see conquest as a last resort. They seem to genuinely believe they're offering us something beneficial. They're offering us slavery with better, living conditions, President Vasquez said flatly. "That's not a negotiation, that's an ultimatum." The debate was interrupted by an incoming transmission from deep space. The signal was unlike anything Earth's communication arrays had ever received, composed of harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with human consciousness. "This is High Chancellor Zephyros of the Celestial Dominion speaking to the leaders of the human species." The voice that filled the room carried an alien quality that made everyone present feel simultaneously insignificant and strangely important. It was the voice of a being who had commanded the loyalty of trillions, now speaking to a species that had barely left its home system. "I offer you greetings and acknowledgement of your martial capabilities. Your species has achieved something that was thought impossible. You have proven that the Dominion is not invincible." President Vasquez leaned forward, her diplomatic instincts warring with the knowledge that this being had just tried to conquer her world. "High Chancellor, we're prepared to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence." "Terms," Zephyros repeated, and there was something almost like amusement in his voice. "You speak as if you were equals. Your species controls one world. The Dominion spans 50,000 star systems, yet you demand terms." "We demand respect," Vasquez replied firmly. "We've shown we can defend ourselves. The question is whether you can accept that some species prefer freedom to your version of paradise." The pause that followed stretched for long seconds. When Zephyros spoke again, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "There are things you do not understand about the galaxy, young species, threats that make our conflict seem like a children's game. The Dominion's expansion was never about conquest. It was about survival, about gathering enough strength to face an enemy that nearly destroyed us 10,000 years ago." "And what enemy is that?" President Vasquez asked, though something in the alien's tone made her suspect. She didn't want to know the answer. "The Void Devourers," Zephyros replied, and his voice carried the weight of ancient terror. "They are returning. Our deep space sensors have detected their scout ships moving through the outer rim. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake." The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Dr. Okafor was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long do we have?" "Our calculations suggest they will reach inhabited space within 1 solar year," Zephyros admitted. "The Dominion has spent 10 millennia preparing for their return." Every world we've brought into the Empire, every ship we've built, every alliance we've forged has been in preparation for this moment. And you want us to join your Empire to fight them, General Hayes concluded. I want you to survive, Zephyros corrected. Your species has shown remarkable ingenuity and resilience. But you cannot face the Void Devourers alone. No species can. Even the combined might of the Dominion may not be enough. President Vasquez exchanged glances with her advisors. The situation had just become infinitely more complex. Earth had won a battle against an advanced alien empire, only to discover that Empire was the only thing standing between them and something far worse. We need proof, she said finally. Show us these Void Devourers. Show us the threat you're talking about. Very well, Zephyros replied. But know this, humans. Once you see the true enemy, you will understand why the Dominion has never been about conquest. It has always been about survival. And survival requires unity. The transmission ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Earth's moment of triumph had suddenly become the prologue to a much larger and more terrifying story. Admiral Chun, still aboard the Defiant, received the briefing about the alien chancellor's message with growing unease. She had spent her life preparing to defend Earth from external threats, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Torres said quietly, if what they're saying is true, we might have just won a battle only to lose the war. Sarah stared out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was stirring. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and they were afraid. That fact alone was enough to send chills down her spine. Maybe, she replied, but we've shown them that humans don't give up easily. If there's a war coming, we'll meet it on our terms. The question that haunted her was whether human stubbornness would be enough against an enemy that had nearly destroyed a galactic empire at the height of its power. The Void Devourers were coming, and Earth was about to learn that sometimes the greatest victory is just the beginning of an even greater challenge. The ancient enemy awakens. The holographic display in the Eternal Citadel's war room showed images that defied comprehension. Entire star systems reduced to empty void, their suns extinguished, their planets consumed down to their very atoms. The Void Devourers had returned, and they were hungry. High Chancellor Zephyros stood before the assembled representatives of 50,000 worlds, his ethereal form dimmed by the weight of ancient memories. Around him, the greatest minds in the galaxy struggled to process the intelligence reports coming from their deep space monitoring stations. The Kethra system is gone, reported Fleet Admiral Nexus, his usually confident voice shaken. 8 billion inhabitants, 6 worlds, 1 Class G-star, all consumed in less than 72 hours. The assembled delegates erupted in panicked whispers. The Kethra system had been one of the Dominion's most heavily defended sectors, protected by 3 full battle fleets and a network of orbital defense platforms. If it could fall so quickly, nowhere in the galaxy was safe. On Earth, President Elena Vasquez stood in the newly constructed Planetary Defense Center, watching the same intelligence feeds that the Dominion had reluctantly shared. The images were beyond horrifying. The Void Devourers didn't just destroy worlds, they unmade them, leaving behind spatial anomalies where matter itself seemed to cease existing. Dr. Okafor, what are we looking at here? The president asked, her voice carefully controlled despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing to Dr. Amara Okafor adjusted her analysis equipment, her dark eyes reflecting the strange patterns of energy that marked the Void Devourer's passage. From what I can determine, they're not just consuming matter. They're consuming space-time itself. The areas they leave behind aren't empty space, they're literally nothing. No dimension, no existence at all. Admiral Sarah Chun, who had been studying the tactical data from the Dominion's first encounters, looked up from her displays. The Dominion's records show they've been preparing for this for 10,000 years. Every defensive strategy, every technological advancement, every alliance they've formed has been aimed at stopping these things. And yet, they're still losing, General Hayes observed grimly. 3 systems gone in the past week, and their fleets can barely slow them down. The truth was worse than anyone wanted to admit. The Celestial Dominion, with all their advanced technology and 10 millennia of preparation, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each world they consumed a doctor. Elena Vasquez turned to her advisors. The Dominion is asking for our help. They want to form a united front against the Void Devourers. After they tried to conquer us last month, General Hayes pointed out, this could be an elaborate deception to get us to lower our guard. General, Dr. Okafor said, quietly, I've been analyzing the sensor data. The energy signatures are consistent across all the destroyed systems. Whatever these Void Devourers are, they're real, and they're heading toward inhabited space. President Vasquez made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. Admiral Chun, prepare the fleet for departure. We're going to join the Dominion's defense fleet. Ma'am, with respect, we have 37 operational ships, Admiral Chun replied. The Dominion has lost over 2,000 vessels in the past week. What difference can we make? Maybe none, the president admitted, but we're going to try. The human fleet's arrival at the Dominion's primary staging area caused a sensation throughout the alien armada. Ship after ship of crystalline perfection surrounded the crude metal vessels of Earth's Navy, their crews broadcasting everything from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. High Chancellor Zephyros himself came aboard the U.S. Defiant to meet with Admiral Chun, his energy-based form adapting to the ship's atmosphere with obvious discomfort. Admiral Chun, he began, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance of his species, but tinged with something that might have been desperation. I must admit, I did not expect your species to answer our call for aid. We're not doing this for you, Sarah replied bluntly. We're doing this because if these Void Devourers consume the galaxy, Earth will be next. Pragmatic. I can respect that. Zephyros gestured to the tactical displays showing the current battle positions. Our strategy has been to engage them at the edge of each system, using our superior technology to destroy them before they can reach inhabited worlds. How's that working out for you? Admiral Chen asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. It is not, Zephyros admitted. The Void Devourers adapt to our tactics faster than we can modify them. They learn from each engagement, growing stronger and more efficient. Our perfectly ordered battle formations have become predictable, our advanced technology insufficient. Admiral Chen studied the tactical data with growing understanding. The Dominion's approach to warfare was based on order, efficiency, and technological superiority. They fought with mathematical precision, their movements calculated to optimize resource usage and minimize casualties. Against an enemy that adapted and evolved, such predictability was a fatal flaw. Chancellor, she said slowly, your problem isn't that you're not advanced enough. Your problem is that you're too advanced. You've become so efficient that you've forgotten how to be chaotic. Zephyros's form flickered with confusion. Chaos is inefficient. It leads to unnecessary losses and tactical errors. Sometimes, Admiral Chen agreed, but it also leads to unpredictability. If your enemy can't figure out what you're going to do next, they can't adapt to counter it. The concept seemed to cause the alien chancellor physical discomfort. His species had spent millennia perfecting the art of logical warfare, eliminating randomness and emotion from their tactical doctrine. The idea of deliberately introducing chaos into their battle plans was almost incomprehensible. You suggest we abandon 10,000 years of military evolution to embrace randomness? I suggest you let us show you how humans fight, Admiral Chen replied. We'll take point on the next engagement. Your fleets can provide support, but let us set the tactical approach. The opportunity came sooner than anyone expected. The Void Devourers had begun their assault on the Tigris system, home to 12 billion inhabitants across 4 worlds. The Dominion's 7th Fleet was already engaged, following their standard tactical doctrine of forming defensive perimeters and engaging the enemy at maximum range. They were losing. Admiral Chun watched the battle unfold on her displays, noting how the Void Devourers moved with an almost organic fluidity, their dark ships seeming to flow around the Dominion's rigid formations like water around stones. All ships, this is Admiral Chun, she broadcast on the human fleet's tactical frequency. Forget everything you learned in the academy. We're going to show these things what happens when you pick a fight with the descendants of predators. The human fleet's approach was everything the Dominions was not. Instead of maintaining formation, the ships scattered seemingly at random, each captain given broad objectives, but complete freedom in how to achieve them. They attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously, their crude weapons firing in patterns that seemed to follow no logical sequence. The Void Devourers, which had been systematically dismantling the Dominion's ordered formations, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that defied their adaptive algorithms. Just as they began to counter one human ship's attack pattern, that ship would completely change its approach, forcing the Void entities to start their analysis over again. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the UES Wolverine, found herself in close combat with a Void Devourer that seemed to be made of living darkness. Its weapons fired streams of nothingness that erased anything they touched, but Maria had grown up in the slums of Sao Paulo, where survival meant being unpredictable. "This is Wolverine," she called out. "I'm going to ram this thing." "Negative, Wolverine," came Admiral Chen's voice. "You're too valuable to lose." "Then I'll ram it halfway," Maria replied, and sent her ship into a suicidal dive toward the Void entity, only to veer away at the last second and rake its flanks with plasma fire. The Void Devourer, which had been preparing to counter a ramming attack, was caught off guard by the feint. Its adaptive system struggled to process the illogical behavior, buying precious seconds for other human ships to exploit the opening. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human captains embraced the chaos of their nature. They used damaged ships as decoys fired at empty space to confuse enemy sensors, and even had two ships deliberately collide to create a debris field that masked their approach. High Chancellor Zephyros watched from his command ship in growing amazement. The human tactics were wasteful, inefficient, and completely insane. They were also working. "Strategic Advisor Kirith," he called to his chief tactician, "are you recording this?" "Yes, High Chancellor," Kirith replied, his crystalline form pulsing with confusion. "But I do not understand how to quantify their methods. They seem to be fighting based on instinct rather than calculation." "Instinct," Zephyros repeated. The word held concepts that his species had largely abandoned in their pursuit of perfect order. "They are fighting like animals." "Evolved animals," Admiral Chin corrected, having overheard the comment on the shared command frequency. "We spent millions of years learning to hunt and survive. You can't program that kind of experience into a computer." The tide of battle was turning. The Void Devourers, faced with an enemy that refused to follow predictable patterns, began to retreat. For the first time in 10,000 years, they had encountered something they couldn't adapt to quickly enough, but the victory came at a cost. The human fleet had lost 8 ships, nearly a quarter of their total force. The Dominion's precise tactics would have achieved the same result with far fewer casualties. "Admiral Chun," Zephyros said as the immediate threat passed, "your methods are effective, but the cost in lives and resources is substantial." "Freedom isn't free, Chancellor," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human struggle. "Sometimes you have to pay a price for the right to exist on your own terms." As the combined fleets regrouped, intelligence reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The Void Devourers were changing their approach, becoming more cautious in their attacks. The unpredictable human tactics had introduced an element of uncertainty into their calculations, but there was more troubling news. The Void Devourers weren't just consuming matter and energy. They were consuming the very fabric of space-time, leaving behind wounds in reality that were slowly expanding. If they weren't stopped soon, the damage to the galaxy would become irreversible. "Chancellor," Admiral Chin said as she studied the latest reports, "we need to take this fight to them. If we keep playing defense, they'll eventually overwhelm us through sheer attrition." "Impossible," Zephyros replied. "We do not know where they come from or how to reach their source. They appear from the void between galaxies and disappear just as easily." "Then we make them come to us," Sarah said, her mind already working on the problem. We give them a target they can't resist. The plan that emerged was as audacious as it was dangerous. Instead of defending scattered worlds across the galaxy, they would concentrate their forces around a single target and dare the Void Devourers to attack it. The target would be Earth itself. "You're proposing to use your homeworld as bait," Zephyros said, his form flickering with disbelief. "I'm proposing to use our homeworld as a trap," Admiral Chun corrected. "If we can lure the main Void fleet to Earth, we can hit them with everything we've got." The debate that followed was heated and desperate. The Dominion's advisors argued that the plan was too risky, that the loss of Earth would demoralize the human forces and potentially doom the entire galaxy. But the humans were unanimous in their support. "This is our choice to make," President Vasquez said during the final planning session. "Earth is our world to defend or sacrifice as we see fit." The decision was made. The combined human-Dominion fleet would make its stand at Earth, using humanity's homeworld as the ultimate lure for the Void Devourers. It was a gamble that would determine the fate of the galaxy. As the fleets prepared for the final battle, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking out at the blue marble of Earth suspended in the void. She had spent her life defending this world, and now she was about to risk everything on one desperate throw of the dice. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Torres said quietly, "do you think we can win?" Saracen smiled grimly. "Torres, we're humans. We've been fighting impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees. The Void Devourers are about to learn what happens when you threaten our home." The fury of the Forgotten, the greatest armada in galactic history, assembled in the Sol system, a fusion of crystalline perfection and human ingenuity that defied every tactical doctrine ever written. Ships from 50,000 worlds formed defensive perimeters around Earth, their weapons trained on the empty space between stars where sensors indicated the approaching darkness. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the tactical displays that showed the impossible scope of the coming battle. The Void Devourers were approaching as a unified force for the first time in 10,000 years, their hunger drawn by the concentrated life energy of the assembled fleets. "Sensor contacts," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, his voice tight with controlled fear. Multiple signatures emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. The display screens flickered and went black for a moment, then showed something that challenged the very concept of existence. The Void Devourers weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were tears in reality itself, moving wounds in space-time that consumed light and matter with equal appetite. High Chancellor Zephyros materialized on the bridge of the Defiant, his energy form crackling with barely contained power. "Admiral Chun, are you certain about this strategy? We have concentrated 90% of our remaining forces in this system. If we fail here, the galaxy dies with us." "If we fail anywhere else, the galaxy dies anyway," Sarah replied, her weathered hands steady on the command console. "At least this way, we go down fighting." The human fleet had been integrated into the Dominion's battle lines, but not in the way any military strategist would have planned. Instead of forming coherent formations, the human ships were scattered seemingly at random throughout the defensive perimeter, each captain given broad objectives, but complete freedom in execution. Dr. Amara Okafor, now serving as the combined fleet scientific advisor, was monitoring the Void Devourers' approach from her position aboard the Dominion flagship. "Their energy signatures are unlike anything we've encountered," she reported. "They're not just consuming matter and energy. They're consuming the quantum foam that underlies reality itself." "Meaning?" Admiral Chen asked, though she suspected the answer wouldn't be encouraging. "Meaning they're not just destroying things," Dr. Okafor replied. "They're unmaking them, erasing them from existence so completely that they never existed at all." The implications were staggering. If the Void Devourers succeeded in their consumption of the galaxy, not only would all life cease to exist, but it would cease to have ever existed. The very history of countless civilizations would be deleted from the universe. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun," Sarah broadcast on the combined fleet frequency. In case anyone was wondering what we're fighting for, Dr. Okafor just reminded us. We're not just fighting for our lives or our worlds. We're fighting for the right to have existed at all. The response came from across the galaxy, transmitted through quantum communicators that allowed instantaneous communication across vast distances. Ships from species that had never worked together, crews that had been enemies for millennia, all united in their determination to face the ancient darkness. The first wave of Void Devourers reached the outer defensive perimeter 3 hours later. The Dominion's heavy cruisers opened fire with weapons that could crack moons, their energy beams striking the advancing darkness with the force of stellar explosions. The beams simply disappeared, swallowed by the hungry void without leaving so much as a ripple. Conventional weapons are ineffective, reported Fleet Admiral Nexus, his usual confidence shaken. The void entities are absorbing our energy attacks. Then we stop being conventional, Admiral Chin replied. All human vessels execute Pattern Omega. Pattern Omega was barely a pattern at all. It was organized chaos, a battle plan that called for human ships to attack using their most unpredictable instincts. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the UES Wolverine, launched herself directly at the largest void entity, her ship's engines pushed far beyond safe parameters. "Wolverine, what are you doing?" came the frantic call from the Dominion tactical coordinator. "Something stupid," Maria replied, and activated her ship's emergency beacon while simultaneously firing every weapon she had at empty space. The void entity, which had been preparing to consume the approaching ship, suddenly found itself confused by the mixed signals. The distress beacon suggested a disabled vessel, but the weapon's fire indicated active hostility. Its adaptive system struggled to process the contradictory information. In that moment of confusion, Maria's ship slipped past the entity's defenses and delivered a full spread of nuclear missiles directly into its core. The explosion didn't destroy the void entity, but it did something unexpected. It caused the creature to flicker, its form becoming unstable as it struggled to maintain coherence. "Did you see that?" Dr. Okafor called out excitedly. The nuclear detonation disrupted its quantum structure. It's not invulnerable to all forms of energy. It's the randomness, Admiral Chin realized. Nuclear fission is inherently chaotic. The void entities can predict and absorb ordered energy, but they can't process true randomness. The discovery changed everything. Within minutes, human ships throughout the fleet were adapting their tactics, using controlled chaos to disrupt the void entity's ability to predict and counter their attacks. They fired weapons in random patterns, changed course without tactical reason, and even deliberately damaged their own systems to create unpredictable energy signatures. High Chancellor Zephyros watched the battle unfold with growing amazement. The humans were fighting like berserkers, their actions seeming to follow no logical pattern. Yet somehow, they were achieving what 10,000 years of Dominion military science had failed to accomplish. They were hurting the Void Devourers. Chancellor, Strategic Advisor Kirith said, his crystalline form pulsing with confusion, "I cannot calculate the humans' tactical efficiency. Their actions seem to violate every principle of warfare." "Perhaps," Zephyros replied slowly, "that is why they are succeeding." The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The human tactics were effective but costly, while the void entity's adaptive abilities allowed them to eventually counter even the most unpredictable attacks. Ships were lost on both sides, their crews making the ultimate sacrifice to buy time for their comrades. Then something unexpected happened. The largest void entity, which had been consuming the debris from destroyed ships, suddenly convulsed and began to change. Its form became more stable, more defined, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed familiar. "Why do you fight us?" the entity asked, its words transmitted directly into the minds of everyone in the fleet. "We are not your enemies. We are your predecessors." The revelation hit the combined fleet like a physical blow. Admiral Chun felt her blood turn to ice as the implications became clear. "You're not invaders," she said, her voice carrying across the communication networks. "You're refugees." We were the first, the entity replied, its form shifting to reveal glimpses of what it had once been. We ruled this galaxy 10 million years ago, before the younger races evolved, before the Dominion claimed our worlds. We were driven into the void, forced to survive by consuming the very fabric of existence. High Chancellor Zephyros's form flickered with sudden understanding. The Void Devourers are the galaxy's original inhabitants. The Dominion has been built on their bones. And now you've learned to fight like we once did, the entity continued, its attention focusing on the human ships. Chaotic, unpredictable, refusing to accept defeat. You remind us of ourselves before we lost our physical forms. Dr. Okafor, monitoring the exchange from the Dominion flagship, made a connection that changed everything. The quantum signatures, she said suddenly, they're not just consuming space-time, they're trying to recreate it. They're trying to go home. The truth was more complex and tragic than anyone had imagined. The Void Devourers weren't trying to destroy the galaxy. They were trying to restore it to its original state, to reclaim the worlds that had been theirs before the younger races had evolved and claimed them. But you're erasing everything, Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of billions of lives. Every civilization, every world, every being that exists now. As our worlds were erased, the entity replied, as our civilizations were forgotten. We survived by becoming nothing, by embracing the void between existence and non-existence. Now we return to reclaim what was always ours. The standoff stretched for long minutes, two ancient forces facing each other across the void of space. The Void Devourers represented the galaxy's forgotten past, while the combined fleet stood for its uncertain future. Between them hung the fate of countless worlds and the billions of beings who called them home. Admiral Chun felt the weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. She was a soldier, trained to fight enemies and protect her people. But how do you fight someone who was fighting for the same thing you were? How do you protect your home when your enemy claims it was their home first? There has to be another way, she said. Finally, her words broadcast to both fleets. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us. There are empty systems, uninhabited worlds. We don't have to destroy each other. Spoken like a young species that has never lost everything, the Void entity replied, though its tone carried something that might have been sadness. You do not understand. We are not seeking territory. We are seeking to exist again, to be more than shadows, feeding on the dreams of the living. High Chancellor Zephyros stepped forward, his energy form brightening as he addressed the ancient beings. Then let us help you exist again. The Dominion has technologies that could give you physical form, worlds where you could rebuild your civilization. Your technology? The Void entity's laughter was like the sound of dying stars. Your entire civilization is built on the bones of ours. Every crystal in your ships was grown in gardens we planted. Every energy pattern you manipulate was discovered in our laboratories. You are children playing with toys you do not understand. Dr. Okafor, monitoring the exchange, suddenly gasped as new data flowed across her screens. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the Void Fleet. They're preparing for a final assault. All ships, prepare for combat, Admiral Chen ordered. But her heart wasn't in the command. The Void Devourers had a legitimate claim to the galaxy, even if pursuing it meant the extinction of every current inhabitant. But then Lieutenant Commander Torres spoke up from his station, his voice carrying a strange excitement. Admiral, I'm reading something unusual. The human ships that have been damaged in the fighting, their quantum signatures are becoming more stable, not less. It's like the chaos of battle is actually strengthening them. The observation sparked a memory in Admiral Chen's mind. The human fleet's unpredictable tactics hadn't just confused the Void Devourers, they had somehow resonated with them. The ancient beings had recognized something familiar in humanity's chaotic approach to warfare. You said, we remind you of yourselves, Admiral Chen said, addressing the lead Void entity. What if that's not a coincidence? What if that's the answer? Explain, the entity replied, its form shifting with interest. You've spent 10 million years as beings of pure void, pure chaos, Admiral Chin continued, her mind racing as the pieces fell into place. But chaos needs order to define itself against. You can't exist as pure nothing because pure nothing has no meaning. Dr. Okafor picked up the thread, her scientific training allowing her to see the implications. The quantum mechanics support it. Void states can only exist in relation to non-void states. They need each other to maintain stability. You're suggesting symbiosis, High Chancellor Zephyros said, his voice carrying wonder, that the Void Devourers and the current galactic civilizations could coexist, each defining the other. The Void entity's form began to shift more rapidly, cycling through configurations that seemed to test the possibility. It has been so long since we considered anything but consumption. But perhaps there is another way. Admiral Chin seized the moment. The galaxy is vast enough for order and chaos, for void and substance, for ancient wisdom and young ambition. We don't have to be enemies. We can be partners. The negotiation that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives of 50,000 worlds sat down with beings older than their oldest civilizations, trying to forge an agreement that would allow both chaos and order to exist within the same universe. The Void Devourers would be given empty regions of space where they could exist in their natural state, feeding on cosmic background radiation and the quantum foam between galaxies. In return, they would share their ancient knowledge with the younger races, teaching them technologies and concepts that predated the formation of most star systems. But more importantly, they would work together to maintain the balance between order and chaos that both sides needed to survive. The Dominion's perfect order would be tempered by controlled chaos, while the Void Devourer's consuming hunger would be balanced by the creative force of new life. The agreement was formalized in the Treaty of Three Realms, establishing separate but interconnected domains for the Void Devourers, the Celestial Dominion, and the independent species that chose to remain neutral. Humans, having served as the catalyst for the peace, were given the role of mediators, their chaotic nature making them ideal intermediaries between order and void. Admiral Chin stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching ships from all three realms dock at the massive structure. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining Dominion crystal technology, human innovation, and void manipulation of space-time to create something that could exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Admiral came a familiar voice, and she turned to see High Chancellor Zephyros approaching, his energy form more stable than she had ever seen it. I wanted to thank you, not just for the victory, but for showing us that victory could mean something other than conquest. Don't thank me yet, Sarah replied with a smile. Wait until the first diplomatic incident when some human captain decides to ram a void entity because it looked at them funny. Zephyros's form flickered with what might have been amusement. I suspect that unpredictability will be valuable in the years to come. The galaxy has become a more interesting place. Dr. Okafor joined them, her tablet displaying readings from the void realm that defied conventional physics. The energy patterns are stabilizing, she reported. The void entities are beginning to take on more permanent forms, while their realm is providing a counterbalance to the Dominion's ordered spaces. And the younger species, Admiral Chin asked, they're adapting faster than anyone expected, Dr. Okafor replied. It turns out that when you give civilizations the choice between order and chaos, most of them choose a bit of both. The transformation of the galaxy was just beginning. Trade routes that had existed for millennia were being restructured to accommodate the new three-realm system. Technologies that had seemed impossible were becoming reality as ancient void knowledge merged with Dominion precision and human creativity. President Vasquez, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council of Three Realms, regularly commuted between the different dimensional states, helping to resolve disputes and facilitate cooperation. The role suited humanity perfectly. Their chaotic nature allowed them to understand both the Dominion's need for order and the Void Devourer's embrace of chaos. But perhaps the most significant change was in the void devourers themselves. As they began to interact with the younger species, they started to remember what they had been before their exile. They had been builders, creators, explorers, driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe. The lead void entity, who had taken the name Ethon after an ancient word for burning one, began to work directly with human scientists to explore the intersection of chaos and creation. Their joint research was producing discoveries that promised to revolutionize understanding of the universe itself. We had forgotten, Ethon told Admiral Chun during one of their regular meetings, that chaos is not about destruction. It is about possibility, about the infinite potential that exists before choice collapses reality into a single state. And order isn't about control, Admiral Chun replied. It's about making sure that possibility can become reality without destroying everything around it. The balance between order and chaos was delicate, requiring constant negotiation and adjustment. There were incidents, conflicts, and misunderstandings as three fundamentally different ways of existing learned to coexist. But each crisis was resolved through dialogue rather than warfare, mediated by humans whose natural unpredictability made them ideal peacemakers. 5 years after the Treaty of Three Realms, Admiral Chun found herself promoted to the newly created position of Galactic Harmony Administrator, responsible for maintaining the balance between the three domains. It was a job that required equal parts diplomacy, military skill, and the kind of creative thinking that only humans seemed capable of. Standing on the bridge of her new ship, the U.S. Mediator, she looked out at a galaxy that bore little resemblance to the one she had known during the war. Void entities moved through space alongside Dominion crystal ships and human vessels. Their different forms of existence creating a tapestry of reality that was far richer than any single realm could achieve alone. Admiral, came a call from her communications officer. We're receiving a priority message from the Outer Rim. It seems a new species has achieved faster-than-light travel and wants to make contact. Admiral Chin smiled, remembering her own species' first contact with the galaxy's greater community. Well, let's go welcome them to the neighborhood. I wonder what they'll think of our little arrangement. As the Mediator moved toward the edge of known space, Admiral Chun reflected on the journey that had brought the galaxy to this point. Humanity had entered the galactic community as primitives facing an impossible enemy, only to discover that their greatest strength lay in refusing to accept impossible odds. They had faced the choice between order and chaos and chosen both. They had been offered the option of surrender or destruction and found a third way. Most importantly, they had shown that the galaxy was vast enough for every form of existence, from the crystalline perfection of the Dominion to the hungry void of the Ancient Ones. The galaxy had become a place where gods could beg mortals for mercy and find instead something far more valuable: understanding, cooperation, and the chaotic creativity that made existence an adventure rather than a burden, and in the end, that had made all the difference.